basketball can be a mysterious sport.
The team whose logo is in this envelope will have the first pick in the NBA draft.
Watch James. Now wanted a timeout, but too late to get it. And 5 minutes go up on the clock. Overtime here in game one.
Will Giannis win a title in a Milwaukee Bucks uniform?
It's hard for me to say that, Jay, considering how loaded the Lakers are. I don't know if you've been watching Taylor Horton Tucker over the last couple of days.
But what if those mysteries could be solved? What if those conspiracies are reality? The hoop truth is out there. Can you handle it? Hey, welcome back. We're going to skip the introduction. Sunday, September 18th. We haven't recorded in at least a month, if not longer. Welcome back to the Hoop Truther podcast. Well, with me, as always, Nick Andre at Nick Andre ATR on Twitter. Great day for you, Nick. How are you feeling?
I'm doing great, man. Disappointed that the WNBA season is wrapped up, but shout out to the Las Vegas Aces. That's all I got to say.
Let's do that right away. Shout out to the 2022 WNBA champions, the Las Vegas Aces. Big shout out to Becky Hammon, who couldn't get a job in the NBA despite numerous interviews, wins a championship in her first season with Las Vegas. Shout out to Asia Wilson. What did you say the whole year? What was the whole year you were saying on this podcast, on any podcast you could go?
It's Asia's year. It's Asia's year. When I came up with the line, practically, I do a lot of preparation coming into the WNBA season, and coming into this year, if for all the WNBA fans, if you remember last year, the Aces lost to the Phoenix Mercury in the conference semifinals, losing their shot of actually making it to the WNBA finals a year ago. So coming into this year, I said, you know what? For some reason, I just said, you know what? I think Asia's going to figure it out, and she did it. MVP of the 2022 WNBA season. Elevated her defense, won Defensive Player of the Year.
Yeah. And
now she's a WNBA champion. So everything that I kind of said and ended up coming into light. And I'm just happy for the Aces, man. This is a really good series. Also, shout out to the Connecticut Sun as well. They had a pretty hard-fought series. Shout out to Jonquel Jones, Alyssa Thomas, DeWanna Bond, and the rest of that team. Even though the Aces did win in 4 games, it was definitely a competitive series, especially in this game and game 4 today. So definitely kudos to them as well.
Big shout outs to everyone. And I appreciate that. Obviously, I always root for smaller markets, but the Aces are one of the best funded teams in the WNBA. They paid more for their coach than anyone else has. They paid for their roster more than others are. I'm hoping this encourages people to pump some more money into their teams in the WNBA. And we're ready for expansion, aren't we, Dre?
100%. WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert mentioned it, I think, a few weeks ago. Expansion is gonna happen. I'm not sure which cities are going to be looking to get a WNBA team, but I'm hoping that we get something within the next possible 3 to 4 years. So we'll see.
We would love a team in Milwaukee if there's not too many Midwest teams. The Milwaukee
that'd be
Joes
nice.
were a long time ago. You don't have to do that name again, but I think the city would love a WNBA team. Big shout out to, once again, Las Vegas Aces, our first championship in franchise history. And right as their season is ending, the Eurobasket tournament ended as well. Let's talk about that real quick. We're jumping right in, folks. We're going to talk about our projected standings for the NBA in just a minute. But we're going to cover some news first. Give a couple minutes if you care that much. Spain, who was a former powerhouse in these type of tournaments, in the Eurobaskets and World Cups, have been a little bit of an underrated team since the Gasols and the Rubios and other players like them have retired from international play. But behind the likes of guys like Bo Cruz, if you guys have seen Hustle, Juancho Hernan-Gomez, with 27 points today, to beat France, who was like a pretty legit powerhouse this year. Rudy Gobert was having a pretty good Eurobasket. And some of the other players on there, Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot had a couple of games. Also, third gold medal, the bronze medal, third place. Germany wins. Franz Wagner. We're going to talk about Wagner when we cover the Magic a little bit later, but I'm really excited to talk about the guys that came back from this Eurobasket, including Wancho, who took a while for him to get signed, but I think he found the right place in the Raptors who could really use his services. Let's see if maybe if Bo Cruz has not a breakout season, but becomes a legit rotational player for the first time in the NBA. 2K's out. Dre, you playing 2K?
I haven't yet, man. Honestly, I've seen a lot of mixed reviews about it. I've seen some people love it. I've seen some people hate it. I just haven't gotten it yet because I know how crazy that I could be. I'm going to spend the money on the game, and then I'm always going to spend at least $200-$300 on VC because I need to rush to get to that 90 overall. But we're going to push to make it happen possibly later on this week. I was talking to my guy CJ on Count the Bucket. Shout out to him. He absolutely loves the game. He loves the story. So I'm excited to get it this week, so I'm gonna see for myself how it goes.
Check it out, people. I mean, if you don't want to pump money into 2K, that's totally fine. I respect that because the games aren't always great. I haven't played any of the My Player. I haven't played any of the My Team. I always go straight to My League, and I'm simming seasons and I'm running teams. I've got a fantasy draft right now where I have Giannis and Dyson Daniels and Josh Giddey fucking shit up with Jabari Smith Jr. And I just run it for a decade, see if I can do a dynasty, something like that. I like the new 2Ks because of the new jerseys, the new rankings, and the rookies that coming in. I want to play with Paolo. I want to play with the Magic. I want to play with the Cavs. So in terms of that alone, I'm a fan. Shot mechanic is wonky, but I'm figuring it out. I'm spending some time on it.
Have you seen the new Utah jerseys?
No, yeah, they're fucking terrible. I mean, Utah's going to be terrible this year, and their jerseys are going to reflect that. Remember when Minnesota introduced neon jerseys, and they were terrible right after? And then before that, the Atlanta Hawks introduced some neon jerseys with like their feathers, and it made no sense, and then they sucked. I think the same thing is going to happen for Utah. They got neon jerseys. They're terrible. They're going to suck for a couple of years. It happens. This is what we're going to cover in the standings. Dre, any other news that you can think of that we're not going to cover in the top 15 here? And if we think about it later, it's totally fine.
There is one that I'm thinking of right now. I know that it's old news, but we haven't recorded in over a month. But, we talked about this a few weeks back, and it's definitely hurt us. Especially, this is a guy that we expected to have a good year, but now he's no longer going to play.
Oh yeah,
Chet Holmgren. Obviously, I think what was it, the Drew League or the Pro-Am
that
he played in? Pro-Am that he played in.
The crossover Pro-Am, Jamal Crawford's league.
Yeah, unfortunately, he's down. I think it was a torn MCL, I believe.
I think it's things in his ankle. In his foot.
Oh,
I think it's a foot concern, which is really scary for a big man, for a 7-footer. Wishing the best of luck to not only Chet, but especially Chet, but also Thunder fans who have had a lot of pain over the years. I'm hoping this isn't a big setback for Chet. We're going to talk about this, and the one thing I want to say is that it was a weird play that he got hurt on. Where LeBron extends the play because he doesn't want to get blocked by Chet and then falls kind of weird. Not that LeBron causes the injury by any means, but it wasn't like he just went up to block LeBron and hurt his ankle. Beyond that, they canceled that game because it was so slippery. I was watching the game live, and MarJon Beauchamp, the rookie for the Milwaukee Bucks, was playing in that game with a bunch of NBA players. I thought that was really fun. He slipped like 3 or 4 times on layups. Just because of the condensation alone. I was really worried he was going to get hurt. Thankfully he didn't, but that shows just how not okay the conditions were for athletes. So yeah, hopefully Chet's doing okay. If anything else pops up while we're recording, we can talk about it. I'll be keeping an eye on Twitter like I usually do, but Dre, let's make a decision right now. Do you want to start East Coast or West Coast?
We can go East Coast because I think we'll both have some different opinions on this because the East is really strong. Like, especially as I was making my list, I was like, oh my God, like there's a lot of teams that may be good. They have a nice young roster, but they may not get into that top 10. So let's talk about it.
So here's what we've got. I told Dre to prepare the top 10 for each conference that he thinks, no projected record. And this is right now. Obviously, there's potentials of a couple more somewhat big trades happening in the NBA that will shake these projected standings. But it's also just an excuse for us to talk about what we think of each team before the season starts in less than a month. This isn't concrete. This is low stakes. If you guys want to pull clips from this to yell at us later in the season, that's totally fine. But we're not saying this is concrete by any means. So the top 10 people that will participate in the play-in, that means 5 teams are not going to be included in each conference. Dre, who are your 5 teams that are going to be in the lottery in the Eastern Conference?
Oh, for the lottery in the Eastern Conference. So let me go back. So I got my top 10.
Yeah, sorry. I should have. Yeah, it shouldn't be too difficult. But yeah, let me know.
All right, give me 1 second. Let me grab my list real quick.
No, you're fine. I will do a little bit of vamping in the thing. So the 5 that I have, and if it shocks you, that's totally fine. But I'm going to go all 5 real quick and why for a second. Detroit Pistons. I think one more year for the Pistons. I don't buy personally. I think Ivy's going to have a great rookie year. I think Cade is going to have a great year too. Like I'm talking, don't be surprised if Cade is scratching for a third team All NBA type of position this year. But personally, I really don't buy the Jalen Duren and Isaiah Stewart pairing in the front court. And I'm not sure the Pistons have that much of a better option. Maybe they start Alec Burks at the 3 with someone else. But I think that they're going to need a 4 to compete in the Eastern Conference. And I think they're going to be like an 11 or a 12 seed. They're not going to be in the basement again. But one more year to get Cade a little bit more development, a couple more experience for the other guys. And that's when they're going to break it. For then Charlotte, I just think they have a terrible roster right now. They have a first rounder going to the Spurs, I believe, right now, but it's top lottery protected, if not top 22. So they could use another lottery pick because this is among the worst rosters in the NBA besides LaMelo Ball. The Indiana Pacers, even if Buddy Hield and Miles Turner are still on the roster, I think they're going to lose a lot of games. One more lottery pick I think they could use to go with Benedict Mathurin, Tyrese Halliburton, Chris Duarte, guys like that. The New York Knicks, I don't have them making the playoffs or the play-in. I don't think the roster is that great. I think Jalen Brunson is going to make a lot of things easier for them, but not to win like 20 more games than they did last year. And then the Chicago Bulls, which might be surprising to some people. Here's my thing. Lonzo's not going to start the season. We're pretty sure he's going to miss all of training camp, if not the first couple of weeks of the season. And they were really good with him and not that great without him. Dre, you're a DeMar DeRozan believer, and I'll admit that I have a little bit of a bias against him. But do you think he's going to be like third? He was almost like a third-team All-NBA. Like, I don't know. What did he end up? He didn't get an award, did he, when he finished last year? But do you think he's going to be that good for the second straight year for Chicago? Genuinely.
Maybe not like an MVP candidate like he was the majority of last year, but
like I think he's going to be good.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think if he averages around like at least 22, 23 a game, then I think that, I think that'll be a good season for him. I don't know if Chicago wants to try to utilize Zach LaVine as their new number 1 option, because that's what I expected coming into last year.
That's what I did too.
Obviously, with DeRozan having such a great year, and then of course, LaVine was also hurt for a good amount of time as well. So that kind of mixed everything up. So that is interesting though, because Chicago, I actually have Chicago being in the playing position between 8, 9, and 10. So
yeah,
I do think the loss of Lonzo, or at least Lonzo not coming in to start the year, will be a big loss, because it does seem like a real scary injury. So I don't know how long he's going to be out, but I think them missing his impact playmaking on the defensive end, I think that that's going to really, really be big for Chicago. So who do you put in this place? A guy like Ayo Dosunmu, possibly. I think he's pretty good, but I don't know if he really fills the void of a guy like Lonzo, even though he is a great player. So Chicago's got a lot of questions coming into this year. That's why, honestly, in my opinion, they're not top 6 or 7 in the East, in my opinion.
I wouldn't be surprised if they made it to the play-in, especially if Lonzo is healthy for the season. But I'm taking a look at the teams here, and if I'm looking at health-wise, people that are healthy now, expecting them to remain healthy, I don't see the Bulls being much better than the rest of them. That's why I have them. one thing that I will say, it's not fair because he hasn't really had a healthy season, but this is a big year for Patrick Williams because people have been hyping Patrick Williams' potential impact for this team. Not that it's his fault, he's not hyping it up for a long time, and people are expecting results sooner rather than later, especially for a team that traded like 3 first-round picks to get the team that they have right now. And we need to see that pay off. So that's the 5 that I have. Dre, tell me which ones you did have, which ones you didn't have. Or you can just
so we practically have the same thing, but I'll start with the Knicks. Unfortunately, I don't really see much coming out of them this year, despite the signing of Jalen Brunson. Now, I am a RJ Barrett believer. I think he could possibly be an all-star this year, but I don't see anything happening for New York this year. I think Julius Randle is going to stink it up once again. Sorry, New York fans. And Coach Tibbs got to go, in my opinion. I feel like he needs to go after this year if they don't make the playoffs, and they need to just shake up the roster once again and bring in some new personnel. Another team, Orlando. I think Orlando isn't there yet, despite the number 1 pick, Paolo. I think the Magic and the Pistons are kind of in that same slot. Like, possibly give them another year, 2 years of like a little bit of growth and a little bit of experience in the league. Then maybe they could possibly make some noise. And then obviously the Pistons as well. Man, like, it's tough though, because I was honestly kind of debating like which team I would rather have as like that last seed in the playing tournament, whether it be the Wizards or the Pistons. But I feel like Washington probably has that experience, so that may be the reason why they kind of have the edge. But Detroit is really talented, man. Detroit is really talented. I'm a believer in them. I know that you are as well.
Oh, yeah.
And I definitely agree with you that they probably need just another year or 2 years before they can really shake things up in the league.
My thing specifically with Detroit is that I'm a Cade Cunningham guy. I think he's going to be very, very good. I think Jaden Ivey and Duren in the same draft is borderline robbery, just like the year before when they get Cade, Sadiq Bey, and Isaiah Stewart in the same draft. I just don't buy, and this is what young teams do. They try combinations just to see what players can do. You maximize your options. If you find out what they can do, that's just as useful, so you don't do it again in the future when you actually are trying to win games. So I understand why they're doing it. But to me, Isaiah Stewart and Duren reminds me of Nerlens Noel and Joel Embiid. It reminds me of Nikola Jokic and Yusuf Nurkic in Denver. Both talented players. I just don't see the fit together, and I don't think it's going to work. Neither of them are Mobley. The reason Mobley and Jarrett Allen work is because Mobley is this ultra versatile defender and offensive player, while Jarrett Allen also being extremely good at the things that he is good at. And they're just not that. I think Jalen Duren has a chance to be a Jarrett Allen type of impact player, but Stewart's not a Mobley. And I just don't see it happening. They say the shots there. I'm going to believe that when I see it. With Orlando, my thing is that I think Franz is going to break out, and I don't think Franz is going to be the best player on his own team this year. Paolo is coming in as a player in the NBA. I'm not talking all NBA. I'm talking maybe all-star, but they never get all-star to rookies. I'm saying rookie of the year. If nothing happens, it's straight up his to lose right now. Obviously, number 1 pick, that's not a hot take. But for me, even if Isaac isn't healthy, I think the Magic have the coaching and Jamal Mosley. I think they've re-signed Gary Harris and Mo Bamba, which means they're trying to win some games this year. Does Cole Anthony take a step? Does Jalen Suggs take a step? Does Markelle Fultz take a step?
That's what I was going to ask. So, how do we feel about the backcourt of the Magic? Because they're pretty deep as well. They got Markelle, they got Cole Anthony, Jalen Suggs, who was injured for a portion of last year. So, how do you utilize all that talent and really figure out how to really work with those in the backcourt?
I love individually the players they have. Like, I love Cole Anthony as a guard. I love Markelle Fultz as a guard. I love Jalen Suggs, even though he wasn't good last year. He was hurt for a lot of the year, and you give him like a chance for that. But when he was on the court, whether it was because of the injuries or he was rusty or anything, he just wasn't that good. I'm personally a Jalen Suggs believer. I don't think he's going to be anything where, like, I think his absolute bottom is like when MCW was good, you know. I think he's going to be pretty, like, I think he's going to play defense pretty well and be able to pass the ball. Whether the shot comes around is probably what decides whether he's a starter or a rotational player. But I like Jalen Suggs. I just don't see them having a fit together. Like, maybe Cole Anthony and Suggs works. Maybe Fultz and Suggs works. I don't think Anthony and Fultz works. It helps that Wendell Carter Jr., Paolo, and Franz all shoot the ball decently well, so you don't necessarily have to have two shooters at that position, which is why I would start Suggs, or Gary Harris. They'll probably start as a shooting guard, but so I like that. But let's talk about who I think you had. So your number 10 is the Washington Wizards, right?
Mm-hmm.
Mine too. So let's talk about them. They're mid, right? They're super mid team, but I think they're good enough to make the plan.
Right. I don't know. I think there's something that Washington is missing, and I can't really lay my finger on it because I feel like they have a lot of great talent. Obviously, Bradley Beal, Kuz, Rui, Porzingis, who Kristaps, I hope to have a really good season because he honestly had some good stretches like during the portion last year for the Wizards. So I really hope that he can come in and keep that momentum going. But there's just something that Washington is missing for me. The reason why, they can't go ahead.
No, you're fine. It's just like a lot of B-level talent. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The only A-plus talent on the roster is Bradley Beal, who at the age he is now is not much more than an A- talent. I don't think, and that's probably giving him a lot of credit. The reports out of camp is that Monte Morris looks great. I'm a Monte Morris believer. I'm not sure this is the team to unlock him, but maybe he has some chemistry with Kristaps. He can play some pick and roll with him. Even if so, right. I don't think he's going to be good enough to be like an Eastern All-Star this year as a reserve. I could see Kristaps. I think there's good centers in the East, but I could see Kristaps having like a random All-Star season. He had a really good Eurobasket. If he's healthy, he can probably put up close to 20 and 10 on a nightly basis. If he has the shooting back, that's probably better. In my opinion, if this team is going anywhere, what you're talking about, what they're missing in this league, it doesn't matter where you have the talent. You need a wing, like a legit two-way wing in this league to do anything. And right now, they have a chance if Deni Avdija breaks, and there's a chance that Deni Avdija breaks. I'm not sure, but if he does, they have it on their hands. He's 6'9". The defense looked legit last year. Perimeter defense, point of attack, a little
terrific
bit of inside
playmaker.
Defense. The guy couldn't make a layup. And the shot, I think, honestly, it's Dante DiVincenzo syndrome, where his three-point shot almost looks better than his layup, and his percentages might be even better. And he still looks like he has some of the finishing issues. Now, on a team with Monte Morris, Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, Kyle Kuzma, Johnny Davis, guys like that, you don't necessarily need to score, but he needs to be able to hit the corner three. If he can hit the corner three this year, be healthy, and play the defense he was last year, they're a play-in team. Maybe even a borderline playoff seed. I don't see that, but a play-in team. I like their team. Like, if I was a Wizards fan, I'd probably be excited about this team because it's more fun than anything I've seen since the Bradley Beal, John Wall days. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's true.
It's not winning a title. It's probably not winning a playoff series. It might win a play-in game, which would be exciting for the Wizards. I mean, they've had a couple bad seasons, but so I don't know. We'll see about the Wizards. I don't have much more on them, but we both agree they're probably going to be like a play-in team, if not the last play-in team, right?
Yeah, I have them as my 10th seed. So
okay, so I think we can agree on the Wizards as our official 10th seed for the season. Number 9. Now I've got a surprise here, but I want to hear yours. I have a feeling it's Chicago.
Yeah, it is Chicago. It's crazy because I was juggling between like who I wanted as my 9 seed. Just going ahead, I have Chicago 9 and I have Toronto 8. And I was really juggling to see which team I would rather have as one of those other teams. But I mean, we kind of mentioned it, the Lonzo injury is definitely going to have a big effect for the team. And like we mentioned before, I mean, DeRozan is going to have a solid year, but I don't expect DeRozan to have a breakout year the way that he did last year. Not saying that he's not going to be great, but it's just not going to be up par to what he did last year. So Chicago has a lot of questions, in my opinion, coming into this year. I still think that they can make some noise, but I think this season they're really going to have to figure out how this team can really move with one another.
Yeah, I think the Bulls have the worst immediate future of any NBA roster right now. Like the Hornets, think have the worst roster in the NBA besides LaMelo, but LaMelo has a lot of value in the NBA, more so than any player on the Bulls roster, and I think that's not a hot take by any means. But you have them at 9th. I'd probably have them if I had to rank them at like 11 or 12, so it's pretty similar, either in the play-in or not. Like, would you say the Bulls are more likely to miss the play-in than they are to get like an actual playoff seed?
Could be a possibility.
Okay.
It could be a possibility. I'm not going to go that far. I still think they can make the play-in. I feel like they have a solid enough roster to at least make the play-in. Now, getting over the hump past the play-in,
sure.
Depending on who they go up against, I'm not 100% sure.
So last year, the Cavs broke out and they ended up in the play-in, and their inexperience probably led to them losing that play-in game to a more experienced squad. So I kind of went with a reach here, and if it ends up being a bad take, that's fine. But I got the Magic at 9. I think I'm by it. I like Jamal Mosley coaching the team. I think one of Cole Anthony, Fultz, or Suggs will have a big season. If not multiple of them, I just don't think all 3 of them are going to bust this season, barring injury, of course. I think they did the right moves. I like the roster construction. Like I think Gary Harris with Franz and Paolo and Wendell Carter Jr. with select a point guard is a really, really good roster and a really good starting lineup. And I just think that Paolo is so NBA ready that it's not going to matter that they're young. They're just going to win some games against not necessarily like the more experienced teams, but other good teams that are young. I think they can beat them. I don't know. Do you think that's a hot take?
It's definitely a hot, but I'm not mad at it. Like Orlando is definitely talented when it comes to the roster, especially when you add key veterans like a guy like Gary Harris as well. I think that's an underrated addition that people may not be talking about enough. But honestly, I think Paolo definitely going to have a case for Rookie of the Year. I think he's going to have a really solid year. We talked about Franz earlier. Yeah. He's gonna have an even better year in my opinion than he did this past season. And then of course you got a guy like Wendell Carter Jr. as well, who I believe is really going to be a huge piece for this team. So. It's honestly not a bad hot take, honestly, because Orlando is a really good team, honestly. Like when you look at the roster constructed,
I see the vision with their starting lineup more so than I do with Detroit's right now, and that's why I have them higher than Detroit. At 8, you've got Toronto. Tell me about Toronto.
So this is a team. So I'll be honest. I was actually really impressed with Toronto last year, the 6th seed.
Yeah, I agree.
They all know what happened. They went down 3-0 against Philly, but then ended up winning games 4 and 5. Toronto, they're a team that is still good, but obviously they're not the same championship team that they were 3 years ago. But right. I believe they're completely different. Right. So, and I was actually having a conversation with somebody like I think a week ago. Like, who is their true number 1 option? Like, are you picking Van Vliet? Are you picking Pascal, or would you want to give the keys to Scotty and just allow him to just really take over as the number 1 option? So that's going to be a question up in the air for Nick Nurse, but I think Toronto's going to be really good this year, honestly.
I think so. I'll tell you, I don't have them at 8. I have Toronto at 7, so pretty close. I don't think we should sleep on the Raptors at all.
No.
They added Otto Porter in free agency. I think that's actually a pretty big deal. I don't think it got enough attention at the time. Plays defense, is like 6'8", 6'9", shoots threes, exactly the player that the Raptors like to use. They're built for the playoffs, so they don't care what seed they get because they're not a contender. They're going to go 7 and try and hunt a contender. And the Raptors and Nick Nurse love that position. I think year 2 Scotty is going to be a revelation. Defensively, it's going to be new things. But offensively, too, we're going to see just how far Scotty can take his offensive game. I think we saw more of him offensively than a lot of people expected in terms of what he was trying and how he was scoring, and I'd love to see him build upon that. One more – oh, no, go ahead, please.
Well, no, so my thing is, with Scotty, he definitely showed us a lot offensively last year than he probably did even in college. So
right.
My thing is, we know the length that he has. We know that he has that ability to attack. But if he adds like a consistent midi, kind of like how Giannis has right now, like like with his mid range game, if he could add that to his package, I feel like he'll even elevate, just even more moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I'm sure he's working on it. Toronto's among our best in player development. I'm sure they've got a plan
Oh
for him.
yeah,
One thing that I'd like to note about Toronto, there are teams this season that traded a large number of picks because they hadn't really traded many of their picks in the past for an established good player or good young starter this offseason. The Cavaliers sent a bunch of picks for Donovan Mitchell. The Timberwolves sent a bunch of picks for Rudy Gobert, and the Atlanta Hawks sent a bunch of picks for DeJounte Murray. We'll talk about them in a bit. I'm keeping an eye on other teams in the league that have a lot of picks that could still make that home run swing because that's always in play. And my sleeping giant is the Toronto Raptors. Masai Ujiri is smart. I think maybe we overrate like the genius aspect of who he is, like we do with everyone that's good in sports. But he has a plan. And he took a really long look at Kevin Durant. I feel like he ultimately made the right decision and not mortgaging your future, and especially not trading Scotty Barnes, which I wouldn't have done for Kevin Durant. But he took a look and recognized 4 years on the deal, mega superstar, you can win a title. If one of those pops up and Masai can just trade all of his picks and they don't care about the players in return, like Utah didn't care about the players they got in return. They wanted picks for their top players. I think the Raptors would do it without hesitation. You mentioned they don't have a number one scoring option. What if they acquire one? We were talking about players that might get unhappy in their situations. Chet goes down in OKC. Does Shea want to tank for another year? And if OKC is offered the Godfather package for Shea, can they say no?
honestly, that's a good question. I mean, just looking at Shea and just looking at his development, it's pretty tough because I feel like he can be a huge piece alongside a guy like Josh Giddey as far as that rebuild. Oh yeah, 100%. But I mean, you also got to think too. I mean, he's a born Canadian, so that'll definitely be closer to home as well. So honestly, I'm not mad at that. If you had a backcourt of Shea and Van Vliet and allowed him to just be a number one option, because I want to say Shea averaged around at least 23, 24 a game last year.
A lot.
So
I think Shea and Scotty alone is enough. Like I think Scotty. The Raptors are good at roster building. You roster a nice roster against Shea and Scotty, that's enough. In a couple of years, that's enough. And I'm not saying it's Shea for sure. That's just the scenario that I thought up when I was thinking about this, because I really do believe the Raptors are going to make a play. They're not going to force something. If a player becomes available that they don't value like that, clearly Donovan Mitchell wasn't that caliber. But if they do, I think they'll do it because they're not going to be in the lottery again. They're not going to be a top 5 pick again to pick another crazy superstar for Scotty. And they're good drafters, but they know more than other teams, because they've lost stars before, that you need stars with your guys. And I think as soon as it happens in the right scenario, Masai Ujiri is going to jump on it. If he could have done the KD deal without it, I think we would have seen him in Toronto by now. I really, really do. But that's enough for Toronto. We both agree that they're going to be a threat. I don't know who you have at 7, but at 8, I have the Raptors at 7. At 8, I have the Miami Heat, and I'll explain why I've got the Heat here. They're low, and I do have bias against the Miami Heat. You can please call that out. I'm a Bucks fan, but here's my argument. Okay, when the Heat were last an 8 seed 2 seasons ago, it was because they had no point guard, losing Goran Dragic in free agency, and no power forward after Jay Crowder signed with the Phoenix Suns. They were terrible without either position. They were able to squeak out an 8 seed because they have talent in Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, and among the best coaching staffs in the league, if not the best. This season, the season after that, they addressed both of the issues. They traded for Kyle Lowry, and they signed PJ Tucker, and they were legitimate contenders because they filled those positions. Now PJ is gone with no one to fill that position, no backup power forward to speak of, let alone a starting one. And Lowry is still an upgrade at point guard, but will he play? I mean, the guy was playing every other game in Miami last year. I need to see him healthy before we take him seriously. The rumor is Caleb Martin, who they re-signed at power forward, is going to play a lot of minutes at power forward. He's about 6'5". I like it. I think the fit's there. He shoots the three well and he plays defense, but not for 30 minutes a game. Like, who else is going to play power forward? I don't see it. So
It's definitely not Udonis Haslem.
Yeah, it's not Udonis, and Dwayne Dedmon is a good backup center, but he's 35. He's ancient. He's not going to play more minutes for you now. Maybe they can make a move, but they don't have a ton of stuff to trade unless they're moving Tyler Hero, and they're only doing that if it's for a serious move. I'm not really sure. Like, where do you have Miami? Do you have them at 7 or higher?
I definitely have them way higher. I actually have them as number 3, but okay. I can definitely see your argument because Miami didn't necessarily improve their roster as a whole this offseason. I mean, they lost a key factor to the team last year in PJ Tucker, who is now in Philly, and there's a lot of questions up in the air, honestly, because I'll be honest, at this stage, I mean, I read Kyle Lowry, but watching how he was last year, it's like, is he really the guy that you want to move forward to as your starting point guard, especially with this team who is a championship caliber team? I mean, they are up there in age, but they are still a championship caliber team, especially with young players like Bam Adebayo and the rest of them. So there's a lot of things up in the air for Miami. I definitely don't see them winning a championship this upcoming. That's definitely not even like in the conversation for me. So it'd be interesting to see like what they do this year.
Like, is Tyler Hero going to take a step? I don't think so.
No. I think Tyler's role is exactly what it needs to be. I don't think he can ever be a starter or a number one option in the NBA. I think his role is to be strictly 6-man, and that's fine.
I think if Kyle Lowry is fully healthy, he's a pretty good starting point guard, but the Heat signed veterans to play like 30, 35 minutes a game, and it's clear Lowry just can't do that anymore. They need to have someone else. They're going to have that option. Maybe we'll see a lot more Victor Oladipo this year, and hopefully he bounces back. But so I've got Miami at 8. I wouldn't necessarily be surprised to see them win the play-in and like upset an upper seed. I think Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo are like that. I just don't see the argument for regular season win totals right now. So I've got Miami at 8, Toronto at 7. Dre, who do you have at 7?
So I have the Atlanta Hawks, and this one was a tough one too. We all know about the addition of DeJounte Murray. That's going to be a nice backcourt of him and Trae Young. There's still options in the air for John Collins. We don't know what's next for him or not, but honestly, Atlanta did definitely upgrade. But the reason why I have them at 7 is because the East is just super tough, though. So it's like, I don't know if I could see them better than Philly, Brooklyn.
Right.
Cleveland might be up in the air because I actually have Cleveland at 6. So I think the two would definitely be competing for one another. But Atlanta definitely upgraded, but I still think that they still have some work to do moving forward.
I agree. When they first made the move for DeJounte, I think the reactions to the trade were like, Atlanta is a real player in the Eastern Conference. We need to take Atlanta seriously. And then the Bucks added a couple of people. The Celtics added Brogdon and Gallinari, who has since torn his ACL. Philly added a bunch of people. I think Philly had the best offseason among contenders. And Brooklyn ended up not trading Kevin Durant. So I think that they still made an upgrade. I think DeJounte and Trae is the best backcourt in the Eastern Conference. I don't think that's a hot take. Harden and Maxey have an argument, I guess, but I think the Hawks did a really good job. I just don't know. Like, the rest of it is so mid. I'm tired of Clint Capella in Atlanta. I think in the regular season he's super solid, but
playoffs,
I need Onyeka to actually be healthy this year. It's a really important year for Okongwu, in my opinion. I still think there might be too many cooks in the kitchen. Is John Collins just going to take a backseat to both Trae and DeJounte? I'm not really sure. And in my opinion, 6, I have Atlanta at 6. And I think that's high for how I feel about the team, but I recognize the talent with Trae and DeJounte. This all matters on DeAndre Hunter. It's a huge year for DeAndre Hunter because up until now, he's been theoretical. He's this 3-and-D prodigy wing that can defend really good players and hit a bunch of threes. He has done a little bit of one for a couple of games, but he's never done it for a consistent season. Dre, is he on like your list of people to keep an eye out for a breakout, or do you not believe in the Hunter hype anymore?
I think Hunter could definitely have a good season. I don't know if he should be on anybody's radar, but Here's the thing. His job is just to help the team win. Being able to knock down perimeter shots when needed to, being able to be a factor on defensive end. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure like exactly what people expect out of him as far as breakout. Like, is he going to be like the third option or whatever? That might be a possibility. But honestly, like DeAndre just really needs to contribute to help this team win. That should be his main priority, just moving forward.
It'd be really cool to see him be like a legit 3-and-D wing this year. I think it might be a contract year for him, and that'd be important. And also, Atlanta's not done necessarily. There could still be a Collins trade in the works. There could still be a Clint Capella trade in the works. We have no idea. And they didn't necessarily trade all of the picks they can trade right now. If someone else comes available, a wing or something, or a big that they really value, we could see them. Anything else on the Hawks, Dre, before we move to your number 6?
I think I'm good on the Hawks.
Okay, number 6, you have the Cavs, right? Let's hear it.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and get it out the way. Obviously the Cavs traded for Donovan Mitchell from Utah. In my opinion, I think that this really elevates their team. I know that Donovan Mitchell, I think we both kind of agree that we don't really want him to be a number 1 option, but
right,
he can definitely I think with this team, I think it fits just perfectly. He adds a lot of scoring, which last year Cleveland was, I believe, top 15 in offensive rankings. So
I'm sure
I think they could possibly elevate in that category. But I think his veteran presence definitely does play a huge role as well. He's been in playoff positions. He's gotten past the first round.
He's won playoff games on his own. Like, he's legitimately done that. He's dropped 40 and 50-point games in the playoffs on his own. No one's on the Cavs have done that. Maybe Kevin Love, but it doesn't matter.
Kevin Love, yeah, that's true. But honestly, with him adding that veteran experience alongside Kevin Love, I think that's going to help the team. It's still kind of interesting to see who they want to start at that wing position right next to Mitchell, whether it be Cedi Osman or whether it be Isaac Okoro. I think you said Cedi just because he does bring a lot of the offensive end, which I do agree with. Also, Okoro's definitely a better defensive player than Cedi, but that'd be a really interesting experiment that JB Bickerstaff can figure out. And I'll just say this too: I think Evan Mobley's going to have a breakout year this year. He's on my radar as far as having a breakout year. I can see All-Star. I'll just be honest. I can see All-Star this year. I thought that he should have won Rookie of the Year this past season.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, I feel like Evan Mobley is definitely going to elevate. Darius Garland's going to elevate, and then the rest of the team is moving forward. So I know I said before that Cleveland was going to be like a top 4 or 5 seed in the East, but I think I kind of got too ahead of myself, especially when I look at the whole trajectory of the East. But I think the 6th seed is good enough.
I think that's definitely fair for the Cavs. My thing with Mobley is, I think he is never going to worry about this. And I'm not saying this is a bad thing by any means, but if Mobley had been traded or had been drafted by like the Thunder or a team that just has no one, he'd probably put up like 20 points a game just because there's no one else to do anything. You know what I mean? We're never going to see what number 1 Mobley option looked like because he was never on a team that was bad enough, which is good for him and great for the Cavs. I think the defense is going to be generational. I just don't know how many points he's going to put up on a team with Darius Garland and now Donovan Mitchell. I could see All-Star in the East, but I just don't know the route to more than 20 points per game. At 20 is enough, but I don't know how he can get more with the people that are on that roster. You know what I mean?
Right. I wouldn't even say 20, honestly, because I mean, you're definitely right, especially when you have guys in your backcourt. Darius
Mitchell should be the number 1, not the number 1 option, but he's probably going to average the most points on the team.
I agree with that, and then of course behind will probably be Garland. So if Mobley can average around 17 and 10, honestly, that's a pretty good year. Yeah.
I think Allen's going to be great. I do, like you said, I do think it's going to be Cedi Osman. He's coming off a pretty solid run with the Turkish team in Eurobasket. some shooting, a little bit of defense. I think he's been on the Cavs longer than pretty much anyone else on that roster, and he's got some goodwill with JB Bickerstaff. I'm not saying he's going to be the starter forever, but I would expect him to be the starter on day one. I like Isaac Okoro a lot, and I think on different situations he would start. In the playoffs, I'd probably prefer Okoro, but in the regular season, the shooting of Jetty. Important season for Okoro, important season for Jetty of either of them. Moves could still happen. I think the Cavs have the best bench in the Eastern Conference, even with their starting lineup. With Ricky Rubio coming back, he's not going to start the season, but he'll be healthy midway through.
That's going to be big for the second year.
Massive, right? They don't need
100%.
to have a trade deadline because they're going to get Ricky Rubio back. They've got Kevin Love, who's coming off a really good year. They've still got other guys on that roster. So I think you have him at 6. I totally respect it. I got him at 4 right now. I got Cavs at 4. I think if they run a funnel defense where Garland and Mitchell funnel their guy like Utah did, Mitchell is aware of this, to Mobley and Jared Allen at the rim to contest. I don't think it's great for the playoffs, but I think that's the type of defense they'll run, and it leads to regular season success. I would expect them, barring injuries, to be a top 4 seed in the East, and I would expect it to be number 4. Dre, who do you have at number 5?
So at number 5, I have the Philadelphia 76ers. So this was another juggle because I didn't know who to pick as number 5 between them or the Brooklyn Nets, but I'm going to go with Philly. Philly definitely upgraded this year. I think they definitely upgraded this year. You know, getting a guy like PJ Tucker is definitely big, but at the end of the day, they still have Doc Rivers, so that's why I'm kind of like not too high on them.
Right.
But so this is something that I've been going with for a while for Philly. So I think that Tyrese Maxey will be the second option behind Joel Embiid. I know a lot of people expect James Harden to be that, but in my opinion, I don't think Harden can really be that offensive threat that he once was anymore. You know, he's up there in age. The injuries have crawled up to him. So I think that Harden should really prioritize himself as the primary playmaker. Not saying that he can't score, because I mean he'll definitely put up some offense, but I think that with how Maxey really emerged last year, you know, towards the end of the regular season, and then of course, you know, having some moments in the playoffs, I think that Doc Rivers should really utilize him as like their second option right behind Joel Embiid, in my opinion. But I still think that Harden will have a pretty good year as well. I think Harden, if Harden averages around like 21 and 8 assists a game this upcoming season, I think that's a pretty solid year for Harden.
I would expect, I'd almost expect under 20 points a game, but double-digit assists. Like I think we're going to see a point guard year from James Harden. I think we're going to see a good year from Harden too. I'm not saying under 20 points because he's not going to play well. I think he's just going to focus more on the playmaking aspect, more of a Russ role for James Harden. Obviously, better shooting. I think he took the offseason seriously. I'm excited. I'm going to save my Philly commentary for later. My number 5 is the Brooklyn Nets. And here's my thing with them. On paper, they're fine. Kyrie and KD are 2 of the best, probably 2 top 5 scorers, isolation scorers in the sport. Ben Simmons, on paper, if he plays, is a really good fit with them. It's essentially adding like a 6'10" Russell Westbrook. I think that works for this roster. Patty Mills is still there. Joe Harris is still there. They traded for Royce O'Neal, who's like a starting wing in this league. They still have a roster that can compete. I think what's really important for the success this year, and maybe they'll make a move to address it if it doesn't work out, but we're getting full-time starter Nick Claxton this year. What's that going to look like? Is it going to be good? It's good. They can be a top 5 seed. If not, I could see them falling to the play-in personally. Dre, how are you feeling about what I just said?
I'm not mad at it. I can definitely see your point of view. Because I mean, honestly, Brooklyn's just all over the place. We really don't even know what is going on with this team. Honestly, the whole KD saga, we expected something to happen. You know, it really broke the internet like the day that Woj announced it, and then I don't know what happened. They had a meeting in LA, and now all of a sudden KD's all in on Brooklyn. So I mean, which is good for them. Don't get me wrong; it's definitely good for them. But
because they're going to be fine, like they're going to be not a bad team.
Exactly, but I don't know. I'm not really big on this roster. I like the addition of Royce O'Neal, but I don't know if it's really like a big addition, if you ask me. I know that he brings a lot. I know that he brings a lot on the defensive end, and he definitely can make shots on the offensive end. But I don't know. I'm just looking at the whole Brooklyn roster as a whole because we know that they have two dynamic scorers in Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, and then of course adding Ben Simmons to that team who can bring a lot of presence defensively, and then of course be that primary playmaker. But I don't know if I really see championship for them. I think honestly, the ceiling for Brooklyn, in my opinion, is probably second round.
I agree. I mean, there's always a chance that KD just goes nuclear. There's also a small chance because Kyrie doesn't really in the playoffs, but that Kyrie goes nuclear, and I could see them randomly making a run. But the big addition, like you say, you're asking for the big addition. It's Simmons. Let's see because Simmons is a good NBA player. He's a top 10 defender in the league and a top 20 passer. That at 6'10", that's really, really valuable. If he plays, I think he works really well with them, and I think their record is going to improve. When they had Harden, his role was to pass the ball to everyone else, and that's what Simmons would do. In the playoffs, I don't see it, but in the regular season, I think that's enough for the number 5. Did you say who your number 5 was? It was the Sixers. So
and I have Brooklyn as number 4. I have Brooklyn just a seat ahead of Philly. Just kind of piggybacking what I said. So in my opinion, when it comes to Simmons, I think this year can be really good for him because there's not a lot of pressure on him. Because in Philly, he was expected to be that number 2 option, which is why in Game 7 everybody was on his ass because he ended up having the poor Game 7. He was supposed to be that guy next to Joel Embiid, and unfortunately, he just wasn't able to live up to that standard. So obviously, we know that being a top option isn't the personnel of Ben Simmons, but now once you play with a guy like Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, he doesn't have to focus on scoring. So being the primary playmaker, getting other guys involved, and then of course being the anchor on the defense, I feel like that's going to allow Simmons to have a pretty good season. Now we know that he's missed a year, so we don't know what to really expect for him, but I think with this roster, Simmons can have a pretty good season.
My thing is, if Ben Simmons was a regular basketball player and the Brooklyn Nets were a regular basketball team, them acquiring a player like him would be a massive deal, like huge. You know what I mean? 6'10" defender that passes combined with 2 top 5 scorers in the league. It sounds like almost too good to have that type of combination. But we have no idea what's going to happen with this team. What I would hope is that Ben Simmons plays well. So even if KD and Kyrie still get traded out, maybe Ben Simmons is actually worth something if you send him out too. You know what I mean? So I think 5 is there. I could see remember last year when they had a fine record and KD was out for 2 months and then they were in the play-in?
Say that one more time. Sorry.
Do you remember last season when they had a fine record and then KD was out for 2 months and they ended up in the play-in?
Oh yeah, definitely.
If KD or Kyrie gets injured this season, it's the same thing. They have nothing to back it up. If someone gets injured, they're just gonna be in the play-in, if not out of the playoffs. So you got to hope that they have health. My number 4 is the Cavs. So we're in the top 3 for the regular season. Dre, who do you think at number 3 is in the Eastern Conference?
So for number 3, I do have Miami. I still feel like they still have one of the top coaches, in my opinion, Eric Spoelstra. So I do feel like that can definitely get them over the hump. And even though I did mention that Miami didn't really upgrade their roster as a whole, they still got great players. Jimmy Butler, who I expect to have a pretty solid season. Bam should have a pretty solid season, even though, honestly, I'll be real about Bam. I don't think Bam had as good of a season last year as I expected him to have. Yeah. So I'm hoping that this year he can really come in and just really set the tone for the team, honestly. And then, of course, you have other personnel like Victor Oladipo, who I hope to be healthy and really have a solid season as well. So even though Miami didn't really upgrade their roster, I still think they're pretty good to at least be a top contender, playoff contender in the East.
That's fair enough. I have my thoughts on them. I don't think it was just a lack of an upgrade. I think they downgraded their roster too. And I don't mean to sleep on Nikola Jovic, who they drafted in the first round this year. I think he's got some potential as a shooter, but even if he reaches his height of what they're thinking of, it's not going to fill the hole that PJ Tucker left, especially not in year 1. So I'm concerned about them. At number 3, I've got the Milwaukee Bucks. On
Yeah.
paper, I think they're probably the best team in the Eastern Conference for the playoffs. But in the regular season, they're probably starting the season without Chris Middleton, and that's likely going to impact their win-loss record at the beginning of the year. So that's fine. The Bucks don't care as much about the regular season as they did when Giannis was a bit younger. So they're going to rest guys. They don't really care about the playoff seeding. Whatever they end up with, they're going to end up with. I don't think they're going to be like fighting for a 50-win season or the number one seed if it's in grass, because all they care about is the playoffs. The only other thing I'll say about the Bucks at 3, don't sleep on Marjan. He's going to have a good year. Dre, I know you've got Miami at 3, so is Milwaukee your Eastern Championship, or are they number 2 right now?
They are number 2, and I even add the addition that that Middleton is going to be gone at the beginning of the year, which I mean I didn't even think about that, honestly. So
I don't think it's gonna be long, but it won't it'll be, and then he has to like get into shape. You know what I mean?
right. So Milwaukee would definitely be number 2 for me. I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I don't think they really prioritize themselves in the regular season. I mean, they're going to win games, but they're not going to really compete for the top seed in the East or even the top seed in the NBA. So they will. I mean, the main priority is to be healthy for the playoffs. So Giannis is going to have a pretty solid season, but he probably will get his a few times this season. So having guys like him and then Drew. And then, of course, once Mitty does come back, I think they're really just going to really prioritize and just preparing for the playoffs and really chasing a regular season award or whatever.
When they lost in the bubble to the Heat, the next year they lost more games in the regular season because they were tinkering with their defense, figuring it out. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw them do a little bit of that on the offensive this year, losing a couple games just to try out a few more things in their scheme. And that's why I think you end up with them at 3 instead of a little bit higher. At number 3, you had the Heat. At number 2, I've got who I assume is your number 1, the Boston Celtics. How I feel about them, after the All-Star break last year, they were like a number 1 seed in the East, and then they ended up number 3, I think, as a seed. If they're that team, they'll probably be 1 or 2 in the East this year. I think the Brogdon addition helps with the regular season win total if he's healthy, obviously. Is there a Sam Hauser breakout maybe coming? Boston is super high on Sam Hauser, and they signed him to an extension. I don't know if I see it, but I know Boston believes it.
I can see that. I don't know if he really has like a breakout type season, but I do.
Maybe he becomes like an NBA player this year. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I think that he can be a big addition for that team and definitely be a huge part of the rotation. But I definitely have Boston as number 1. Honestly, I'll just be honest. I think Ime can definitely win Coach of the Year this upcoming season.
Sure.
I think that he's kind of figured it out. He got to the finals this past year, and I was really big on having the dynamic duo of Tatum and Brown stay together because I know a lot of people on Twitter were hyping up the possible KD trade to Boston, and then obviously that would have shipped Jaylen Brown to Brooklyn. But just looking at what these two have went through together, I was on the other end saying keep these two together. Right. I'm not saying that Kevin Durant could not be a factor because I definitely believe that him and Tatum probably could coexist on the floor, especially with Tatum's emergence as a playmaker, and then of course being a great defensive player. But
I agree.
In my opinion, you keep those two together, and then of course adding the addition of like Malcolm Brogdon to be your primary playmaker, I think that's a huge addition because it definitely takes pressure off of Tatum, who can be a playmaker, but now he can really prioritize himself in scoring. So I think Boston said they have a really good season. I know that they lost Gallinari, unfortunately, to the ACL tear, which would definitely be lost. But I think besides that, Boston will be fine.
Yeah, we'll see if they do any other moves to address that. I'm not totally sure. So I've got them at 2 right now. So that leaves my number 1. It's a surprise from Dre, who at number 5, but I've got the Philadelphia 76ers. To be clear, I do not believe in the Philadelphia 76ers as a playoff team. Don't be surprised if they are the number 1 seed with 60 wins this year and they lose in the first fucking round to some schmuck team because they're just chokers, okay? I don't believe in them in the playoffs. I don't believe in James Harden or Doc Rivers in the playoffs. I have not seen Joel Embiid fully healthy get punked in the playoffs yet, so I don't think he's a bum or anything like that. I need to see him lose in the playoffs fully healthy before I have any opinions there. But just not really believing in them. But in the regular season, this is the best team in the Eastern Conference for that. They had the best offseason among Eastern contenders. They added DeAnthony Melton, who I think is a great backup point guard, could even start some games for him. Danwell House, PJ Tucker, Montrezl Harrell, probably the best regular season backup center Joel Embiid has ever had, even though I don't think he can't play in the playoffs at all. You get a year of development from Maxey, a full year of motivated James Harden. They're built for the regular season. They're going to win a lot of games this year. Probably the best power forward that Joel Embiid has ever had, the best backup center he's ever had. James Harden is going to be the best point guard he's ever had for a full season. You know what I mean? This is the year that Embiid gets the 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, in my opinion, and they're going to win a ton of games. I don't know if that means MVP by any means, but that's how I feel, Dre. Do you feel foolish? Do you feel that I'm not saying it right?
Well, I'll be honest, if we don't have them that high. But I mean, sure. I think we both agree that Philly definitely had the better offseason, probably out of a lot of the top contenders in the East. So, like I said, the PJ Tucker addition, like any team that gets PJ Tucker automatically elevates. We saw, Milwaukee win a championship. We saw Miami get to the conference finals. Yeah. I don't know if Philly necessarily gets to the conference finals or even the finals, but he's definitely going to be, just his ability to be able to knock down 3-point shots and being an enforcer on the defensive end. I think that's going to be a huge key for Philly. So, like I said, I'm not that high on Philly. I definitely think that they'll be a top 5 seed in the East. But then again, I mean, you look at their coach. Honestly, like I don't really expect nothing with that guy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and that's how I feel about the playoffs. But don't be surprised when the Sixers are the 1 seed in the East and they have 2 All-Stars, and it's not necessarily James Harden.
That's a fact.
Okay, so we've been recording for an hour, and you've got a show in 30 minutes, and we've only done the Eastern Conference. Do you want to save the Western Conference for next week episodes, and we can just split it in 2?
We can do that, yeah. Do you want to go into our breakout players real quick? We can just do that.
Yeah, okay. Let's do some breakout players. Let me hear some of yours. So we're going to do some, just so you guys know, I was just talking to Dre, but I'm talking to you guys too. We're going to do the Western Conference projections next week. So maybe if there's a trade, we can cover that too. And then we're going to talk about, we're also going to talk about some of the players that we think are going to break out right now. Dre, do you know how many players you picked up? You listened to this?
I have 3 players, and I already mentioned 2 earlier in the episode, but I'm just going to go through it again. My first guy is Evan Mobley. I understand that he probably won't be a top 2 option, especially with the dynamic backcourt of Donovan Mitchell and Darius Garland, but I feel like he could definitely be able to elevate his play, especially on both ends of the floor. Last season, averaged 15 points a game, nearly 8.5 rebounds, nearly 2 blocks on 50% shooting, so very efficient. So I mentioned it before. If he gets around 17 and 10 this upcoming season, I can definitely see All-Star for him. The second guy I mentioned before as well, Tyrese Maxey, who, in my opinion, will be the second option for Philadelphia offensively behind Joel Embiid. Averaged 17.5 points last year, 48% shooting. Yeah. So with him being able to coexist on the floor with James Harden, that could definitely take a lot of pressure off of him and allow Harden to prioritize more on playmaking. And then my third guy, which might be a surprise to many, I'm not sure, but I really like this guy. Coming into the league, he didn't really have much of an offensive game, but I feel like he's slowly upgrading on the end of the floor besides his playmaking. Tyrese Halliburton for Indiana, averaged around 15 points a game last year, 41% from 3. Like I mentioned before, he didn't really have much of an offensive package, but I think this past year in the trade to Indiana, we definitely saw a little bit of it, and even honestly in Sacramento to a degree. So I think this year he can definitely take a leap. I don't know if it's really all-star status, but I think Halliburton's career is progressing every single year moving forward.
Okay, those 3, I've got 3 myself. Let's go with someone that we mentioned earlier in the episode. This is not a hot take. People are talking about it on Twitter, but I'm a big Franz Wagner guy. I think he's going to have a good season. I could see him pushing 20 a game. I could see him an all-star reserve maybe in Orlando if they have a win total that's pretty solid at the all-star break. Big fan of Franz. He's going to score at all 3 levels. I want to see some more defense this year. But if he does break out, it doesn't have to be because of his defense. Number 2 is another white guy that we talked about earlier in this episode. And this isn't necessarily that I believe it, but I want to manifest it. I want to believe for Wizard fans that Denny Avdia is going to be a fucking player this year. I think the defense is already there, but I want to see him like score some points. Like, what about like a 12 to 15 point per game year from Denny Avdia would be just really cool to see, making some threes, some corner threes. Just some off-ball stuff offensively from Denny Avdia. I would really like to see that, so I'm putting it out there in the universe. And then the third guy that I've got.
Hey, God, just real quick before
please.
Before you go into your third guy, I have a quick question on Denny. I didn't watch a lot of Wizards this past year, but I probably watched a handful of Wizards games. Do you think that Denny might possibly be like scared to score? Because there was many times where I watched the Wizards last year. There was a few possessions where he probably could have taken a quick shot or even could have gotten to goal, but he necessarily didn't. Do you think that might be holding him back?
I think
being a scorer.
Some of his misses are really bad misses. Like, he'll just miss point blank layups, and I think that does get into your head and make you more hesitant to take shots on the court. And I don't know what kind of atmosphere in Washington is. We don't know. Because it's kind of new ownership. It's kind of a new front office and a new coach. They're not doing really well, but no one seems to be really upset. So we really don't know what the environment is. Maybe it's enough to make him believe in himself as a scorer, but even if he can't finish at the rim, I think he can take a step forward with his shooting. And be like a true 3-and-D player with no offensive game regardless. I think that's enough for right now. But I do agree. I think that he has some hesitancy to his game. We'll see. It's a big year for Denny Avdia. And big season coming. This is probably – I'm going to watch this team for the moves they made in the offseason, but for this player's development alone, Minnesota traded for Rudy Gobert to make a real serious push in the Western Conference. And almost all of it hinges on their starting 3, Jaden McDaniels, taking that leap. Minnesota is super high on Jaden McDaniels. Twitter is pretty high on Jaden McDaniels, and I am very high on Jaden McDaniels. I want to see the defense there. I believe it. I want to see it for 25 to 30 minutes a game. I want to see the shot come around. I'm not sure that's there just yet, but I think he can finish at the rim. I think he's got some drive. He seems like a really good kid. And I think if he pans out the way Minnesota says, he is a perfect fit for that starting 5 with Rudy Gobert. Dre, how do you feel about Jaden McDaniels?
I love Jaden. I've been high on him for the last few years, honestly, and I definitely see him take huge, especially for that Minnesota team. They're just so talented.
Yeah,
I could see him possibly being the 6th or 7th guy. What do you think?
Oh, I think he's starting at the 3.
Oh, he's starting. Okay. So yeah,
they traded multiple more picks to Utah to keep him in the deal because they're making him their starting 3.
Okay, so that's even better, honestly. Especially starting at the wing position alongside a guy like Anthony Edwards. I feel like he's definitely going to take a big leap this upcoming season.
D'Lo, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Karl Anthony Towns, and Rudy Gobert is legit for the regular season. Next week, you guys will see just how high I have them in our rankings. But for now, we're going to get Dre out of here. Check him out at Nick Andre ATR on Twitter. Doing other shows like Count the Bucket. He'll also be recording that tonight. Dre, plug your other shit. Let's get you out of here.
Yes, as my co-host mentioned, follow me on Twitter at Nick Andre ATR. Very active on NBA Twitter. Gonna have some articles coming out possibly later on this week, so definitely stay tuned for that.
If you want to support the podcast, you can follow us at Hoop Truther Studios on Twitter, Hoop Truther Studios on YouTube. Give us a like, subscribe, all of that stuff to help us out. You can follow me at _Gucifer. That's Lucifer with a G for some basketball tweets, other things like that. I'm working on a few things on the side, really loosely, no dates in mind. It's potentially really cool, but it's going to require a lot of work, and I'm working with some people on it that are going to help, but I'm not going to talk about it in detail until there's actually some stuff behind it. So I'll keep you guys updated there. But in the meantime, keep an eye on the podcast because we're recording again. NBA season is less than a month away, or at least training camp is, and I cannot fucking wait. I'm so happy for the NBA. Dre, Thank you for coming on. We'll see you next week. Deuces.
Sir. Deuces.